Welcome to Divisionalysis. I'm Fog. The last video rattled a few cages and ruffled a few feathers. Well, I'm not going to stop. Let's go. So we pick up where we left off. In the last video I showed you the difference between this build with all red cores, slowly reducing the number of cores all the way down to 0, and then the difference in time to kill. People lost their minds, thought I was cherry picking, and clearly thought that I was going to stop there. Let's put the cherry picking ideas to rest. Let's have a look at everything else. Red enemy, headshot only, total difference 0.14 seconds. Now let's take it up a notch. Red enemies, body shots only. Total difference 0.14 seconds. Now we're moving to veteran enemies. Now for this, I have adjusted the armor percentage for the veterans. They now sit at 56% armor, 44% health. And I've done this for every enemy type. Adjustments to the damage being done based on the enemy that we're targeting. The results, a difference of 0.494 seconds. An additional 90% added weapon damage resulted in 0.494 seconds. Now let's go to real cherry picking and the best case scenario. Elite enemies, body shots only. Here you have the results. 0.777 seconds. So at this point, it's probably a very good time to remind you that this is the difference of 90% added weapon damage. The difference between an all red build and an all blue core build. 58% burst DPS difference. Only on elites and only body shots, 0.777 seconds. Now there will be people who will come out of the woodwork and say that 0.7 of a second matters. Respectfully, I disagree. Once again, this is 90% weapon damage difference. And what I will also remind you is that for the last 4 years, the majority of the community has walked around with their FAMAS, not noticing almost half a second difference between reloading from empty and reloading from not empty. That's how little your brain actually notices half a second's difference. But if we just back it up and we have a look at the difference of one blue core. For red enemies, body shots only, it made a total difference of 0. One blue core for veterans, body shots only, made a total difference of 0. One blue core for elite enemies, body shots only, made a total difference of 1 bullet. 0 0.07 seconds only when targeting elite enemies and only body shots. That is reality. Here's some more reality for you. Did you notice which one was quicker? Here's the real-time footage of me taking all 4 of those enemies down. And at the end, I'll play them again in real time, from the moment the first bullet strikes till the moment that the last bullet strikes. See if you can pick up which ones are done with 2 less red cores. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you miss it? That is reality. I warned you it was coming. You probably barely had time to recognize what was going on, let alone the difference that those 2 blue cores actually made. That is reality. Burst DPS is not the reason why we need damage on our builds. What it boils down to is twofold. 1, a misunderstanding about the accuracy of burst DPS, and 2, a misunderstanding about its importance. Now there are a number of things that are wrong with a burst DPS calculation, but one of the big ones is that the rate of delivery is already stated. Coming up with a new rate dilutes the accuracy considerably. The rate of delivery is rounds per minute. It's set by the weapon. And I've already shown by ignoring the first bullet principle and the lack of bullet cycle on that first bullet, it can lead to horrendous miscalculations. In the case of Joe, it has led to a margin of error of 50% in the actual result. That's the fact. 50% margin of error. Here is another content creator who has got a completely grey build to make things simple for themselves, and an AK at 147 damage, firing at 600 RPMs, and he's used the AKM in order to make it just 1 or 10 rounds per second to make the calculations easy. So he's used his burst DPS calculation and he's come up with a figure of 1470. He's saying that is what the DPS should be. It's a fundamental flaw in the calculation that he doesn't understand, and he has blind faith in that calculation, and so he thinks that that's what the shooting range should show.
There was a 1.6k in there. If you basically look over at the DPS meter and keep an eye out on it, as I'm going to reset it once more, and basically look at what the highest value that we see there on the DPS meter is. As we had a 1.6 there at some points again, and while it is kind of normalizing towards that 1.47k, it is still actually over it at the end of the max though. It was basically around 1.49 towards the end of it, and there again it's around 1.5 hovering over there, and it's just going up and down.
He uses this as the reason why he doesn't use the DPS meter in the range anymore, because it doesn't match up with his figures. It doesn't match up with your figures because the calculation that you've used is wrong. This is very easily demonstrated with a graph. Simply adding the damage each time and dividing it by the time that's elapsed. And what you can clearly see here is after 1.1 seconds, which is when the calculation kicks in their range, it should read 1603. And at the very end, it will read 1499, or it should read 1499. It's not going to normalize with your calculation because your calculation is wrong. It has failed to consider the first bullet principle. So after 10 bullets, it is 10% inaccurate. After 50 bullets, it's still 2% inaccurate. The higher your damage is and the lower the amount of time it takes you to kill an enemy, the more inaccurate a burst DPS calculation is. We then have the damage side of the coin. In addition to ignoring the first bullet principle, burst DPS calculations also ignore the last bullet principle, which means that some of your damage is dissipated by overkilling the enemy in every single case, every single enemy, every single time. The amount of damage that you're delivering is not represented correctly. Putting aside the fact that the majority of people who have displayed this stuff haven't taken into consideration armor percentages, out of cover percentages, and all of those things that impact damage, what you have is a burst DPS calculation that takes an imperfect damage figure, multiplies it by an imperfect rate of delivery, produces a new rate, and then people using it have the balls to say that what they produce as a result of this is fact. It in no way ever represents fact. Ever. And the burst DPS calculation that this community has taken as gospel is nothing better than a rough guide. Now, as a rudimentary example of this, let me look at measured. Measured, based on burst DPS calculations, it has been considered fact that it is the worst damage talent in the game by a considerable margin. And the reason for this is because of the imperfections in the burst DPS calculation, where it equates damage being equal to time. Now, this is a mistake because damage will never give you what you think it will, whereas time, a saving on time, will always be 100% return on investment. Rate of fire is a time talent, not a damage talent. Measured will take 30% weapon damage from you and give you 20% rate of fire in return. So let's go to the current build that I have. It has flatline on it. We're going to remove flatline and we're going to do the baseline figures and then compare measured with flatline. If we remove flatline, the time to kill on an elite with body shots only is 1.553 seconds. If we add flatline, we now get a time to kill of 1.341 seconds. Now, if we take measured, we remove 30% weapon damage. It now requires 25 bullets to kill that enemy, but it's now delivering those bullets at 17 rounds per second instead of 14.1, which means that its time to kill is 1.412 seconds. It is slower than flatline, but considerably closer than what a burst DPS calculation will tell you. Let's go to the veteran. Same, baseline 0.918 seconds, time to kill. Flatline 0.847 seconds. Measured now delivers the damage in 16 bullets and it takes 0.882 seconds to do so. Again, slower than flatline, but once again, considerably closer than what a burst DPS calculation will tell you. And then we go to a red. Baseline, 6 bullets, 0.353 seconds. Flatline, 6 bullets, no difference in the time of delivery, 0.353. Measured will take you 1 more bullet, but it is delivering those bullets faster for a nil difference in the time to kill. all of this points to measured being almost as good as flatline, and this does not include the fact that measured on a build with a stacking talent will develop damage faster than what flatline will. If we use the elite enemy as an example and we use strikers as being the stacking build, that measured build is now carrying an extra 5% amplified damage into the next enemy that it encounters because it used 5 more bullets to kill and only sacrificed 0.07 seconds in order to do it. So what we can do is we can use these stats and extrapolate based on an increased damage carried into the next target or two. Now, to be clear, we're using the stats from the current build, not a striker's build, but this actually is in the advantage of flatline, not of measured. This is just for demonstration purposes. If we take the stats from the first target and we extrapolate, considering that the same target has been killed for 2 targets in a row, each time measured will gain ground on flatline as far as the damage that is being done. And after 2 enemies in a row of each enemy type, what you get is that measured is now killing elite enemies faster. It's a little bit slower on veterans because it hasn't been able to build up more damage, and the same for a red, but it is closing the gap every single time, and in this case after 2 enemies of the same enemy type, the total for flatline across 1 elite, 1 veteran and 1 normal is 1.905, and for measured the total for the 3 enemies is 1.882. It is now outperforming flatline. Very, very different to what a burst DPS calculation will tell you about the effectiveness of either measured or flatline for that matter. And measured is just one single example of where burst DPS calculations have led us astray as a community about what is truly effective. If you care about these milliseconds of difference, burst DPS is not the calculation that you want to be using in order to make decisions about what is effective and what isn't. In my opinion, these fractions of a second mean sweet fuck all when it comes to actual gameplay. So if these fractions of a second don't make any difference, Fog, why aren't we seeing everybody running around with 6 blue core builds? Well, that is a very good question, but a much better question is, why do we see plenty of people ignoring what other people are saying is the most effective, being 6 reds all damage, instead choosing to take 2 or 3 blue cores, but stopping there and not going for 6 blue cores? That's a much better question. And the answer to both of those questions is actually very easily explained using stats that we've already produced in this video, with one little tweak. And so we go back to the elite enemies, body shots only. We have a look at these figures adjusted based on the number of cores that are present on the build. And then what we can do is we can put a tweak on these figures, and that tweak is reality. We are not 100% accurate in game. And for the sake of ease, I'm going to say 50% accuracy. 50% accuracy results in no change in the number of bullets to kill, but you need to fire more bullets in order to have those hits land. So you now are required to fire 40 bullets in order to land 20 hits on a 6 red core build. 42, 44, 48, so on and so forth. Now what does that mean for our time to kill? We have to fire all of those bullets in order to kill this enemy. That time now goes to 2.682 for a 6 red core build. People are willing to sacrifice 1 red core because the time to kill is 2.824 seconds, and they certainly do not notice 0.14 of a second. They're willing to do another core because less than 0.3 of a second they're not going to notice. They're even willing to go to 3 blue cores, 3 red cores, because that difference is still less than 0.6 of a second. But when we go to 4 blue cores and 2 red cores, whoa! That is a change that I am not willing to accept. A jump of 2.2 seconds in the time to kill that elite enemy. Double the time it takes a 6 red core build to kill. What happened? If you haven't already worked it out, 52 bullets now exceeds the maximum capacity of your magazine. That enemy no longer sits within your burst bubble, as in the total magazine damage that you are capable of producing at 50% accuracy. That is a line that people will not cross, because it makes a noticeable difference to their gameplay. That is what having damage on your build is for. To ensure that you can kill every enemy that you face within a single magazine with the adjustment for your in-game play statistics. How often the enemy is out of cover, how much armor they have, whether you're hitting them in the body, in the head, and most importantly, how many rounds you land on target. The most important multiplier in this game. Everything else takes a back seat to rounds on target. And in the case of this build, 3 blue, 3 red, you're not going to notice any difference. This is literally the best case scenario for having damage on your build, and it results in a difference of less than 0.6 of a second between 3 red cores and 6 red cores. But that is where the line is drawn. After that, you're not capable of killing that enemy inside 1 magazine. That is why you need damage on your build. Whenever I've seen someone using a build that isn't what others considered to be meta, I never looked at them and said, well, you're doing it wrong. I've always said, why does that person find that build the most effective for them? And in creating my channel, all I wanted to do was be able to show people why what they've found from their personal experience in game is different to what they were being told is truth and is fact. I very much hope that this video has given anybody who runs around with a 2 or 3 blue core build, knowing that they are more effective with it, the ammunition to tell anybody that tells them they're doing it wrong, the confidence to say respectfully, I disagree. If you liked, then like. If you want to see more, subscribe. But I will see you in the next one. Fog out.